Welcome to Somnistry Stories. Breathe in deeply and let the gentle rhythm of the rain quiet your thoughts. In a peaceful studio, the scent of warm tea lingers as a brush moves across a canvas, capturing the soft colors of spring. Let's begin. The morning rain fell in an unwavering rhythm against the bay window of Clara's attic studio. Each droplet adding its voice to a gentle symphony that had been playing since before dawn. Clara stood by the window, her paint-splattered linen smock hanging loosely from her shoulders, her hair gathered in a loose braid that draped over one shoulder. She watched with quiet attention as tendrils of fog rose from the rain-swollen creek in the distance, ghostly fingers reaching upward to dissolve into the pearl-grey morning. 6:42, she murmured to herself, glancing at the round wooden clock on her wall. Her voice was barely audible over the rain's soft patter. The light had a different quality this morning, diffused and dreamy, as the mist from the creek gradually extended its reach across the meadow, transforming familiar shapes into soft-edged silhouettes. Clara moved to the small oak-side table where her chipped blue mug waited. Steam from the lavender and honey tea rose in delicate spirals, carrying its soothing fragrance throughout the studio. She cradled the warm ceramic between her palms, breathing in deeply. The warmth traveled through her fingers, up her arms, and settled somewhere between her shoulder blades, easing the morning stiffness that accompanied these early hours. Today, we'll capture how the fog embraces the creek, she whispered to no one, her eyes drawn back to the window, where the mist performed its slow, graceful dance, how it blurs the boundaries between water and air. She took 3 slow sips of her tea, each one measured and deliberate, savouring the floral sweetness that bloomed across her tongue. The rain continued its steady rhythm, a natural metronome accompanying Clara's unhurried movements as she set down her mug on its designated coaster, a small circle of cork worn smooth from years of the same morning ritual. Clara crossed the scuffed hardwood floor to her easel, the yellow gingham rag rug beneath her feet offering a gentle cushion against the cool morning air. The wooden easel faced the window directly, positioned precisely where she had left it the previous day. She adjusted it slightly, tilting the surface to better receive the soft, diffused light filtering through the rain and distant fog. As she settled onto her frayed wicker chair, the crocheted cushion yielded beneath her with a familiar embrace. Before her on the easel sat a fresh sheet of watercolor paper, its surface textured and pristine, waiting to receive the day's observations. She reached for her palette, a vintage teacup saucer with small wells of colour, some dried from previous sessions, others waiting to be awakened. First, the fog itself, she said softly, dipping her brush into a small jar of clear water. The brush, a sable round with a perfectly tapered point, absorbed the water eagerly. Clara touched it to a pan of pale grey watercolour. Fog grey, she murmured, mixing the colour on the palette. That's the color of suspended time. She added a touch of blue to the mixture. And morning secrets. The brush moved to the paper, touching down with barely any pressure. The color bloomed outward, spreading in a delicate wash that mimicked the softness of the actual fog rising from the creek. Clara worked without hurry, allowing each stroke to fully settle before adding another. The rain continued its gentle soundtrack, its steady patter a counterpoint to the hushed whisper of brush against paper. Something on the window caught Clara's attention. A small, glistening presence that hadn't been there moments before. A garden snail had appeared on the outside of the glass, its shell a spiral of earthy brown, its body extending forward in slow exploration of the vertical surface. A silver trail marked its path, catching the diffused morning light. "Hello, little wanderer," Clara whispered, setting down her brush carefully across the rim of her water jar. "What brings you so high up this morning?" The snail continued its unhurried journey across the window pane, unaware of Clara's observation. Its antennae extended forward, sensing the way, while its body contracted and expanded in the slowest of rhythms. The silvery mucus trail it left behind shimmered with subtle iridescence, transforming the ordinary window into a canvas of unexpected beauty. Clara watched, transfixed, as the snail navigated the expanse of glass with what seemed like infinite patience. Time stretched like warm honey as she observed this tiny miracle. A creature so perfectly attuned to its own pace, unhurried by the world around it. The rain fell on both Clara and the snail, separated only by the thin barrier of glass, connecting them in the shared experience of this quiet morning. Returning to her palette, Clara was inspired by what she had seen. "We'll need a touch of umber for that shell," she said, cleaning her brush in the mason jar of water. The water swirled with pale grey as she stirred the brush gently against the glass. And then a hint of silver for that glistening trail. Just enough to suggest what happens when creature meets surface. She mixed a small amount of brown on her palette. Umber, the colour of Earth's patience. The brush moved to the paper again, laying down a soft wash that suggested the distant trees through fog. Beyond the glass, through the rain-blurred window, the creek's swollen form was visible as a darker line cutting through the meadow, its edges softened by the rising mist that Clara was attempting to capture. Through that same window, Clara could see how the rain made the fog dance and shift, never settling into a fixed shape but constantly evolving, responding to the gentlest air currents. Some areas thickened, while others thinned to transparency, creating a living tapestry that changed with each passing moment. The fog nearest to the creek was densest, clinging to the water's surface like a lover reluctant to part. "The fog needs more substance near the water," she murmured, rinsing her brush again. She mixed a slightly darker shade of her fog-grey mixture. "This is for where air meets water." The colour of boundaries dissolved. Her brush touched the paper again, adding deeper tones to the lower portions of the composition. Each stroke was deliberate, unhurried, flowing with the same gentle rhythm as the rain outside. The sound of the rain chain hanging just outside the window created a delicate counter-melody, each copper cup filling and spilling into the one below it, creating a sequence of gentle notes that rang out every few seconds. Plink, 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 plink. The sound mingled with distant bird calls. Spring birds singing from sheltered places, undeterred by the gentle weather. Clara paused again to observe the snail, which had progressed perhaps an inch from its previous position. Its slow determination fascinated her, the way it moved through the world completely at its own pace, neither hurried nor delayed by external expectations. The silver trail behind it had begun to catch more light as the morning gradually brightened, creating a path that seemed almost luminous against the rain-streaked glass. "You're painting too," Clara whispered to the snail. "A temporary masterpiece that will vanish with the next rain." She raised her gaze beyond the window to study the fog-veiled creek more closely. From this distance, the rising mist resembled breath on a cold morning. Visible exhalations from the rain-swollen water below. The morning light strengthened ever so slightly, not in brightness, but in clarity, illuminating the fog from within, so that it glowed with a subtle luminosity. "The mist needs that inner light," she observed quietly, reaching for her palette again. She mixed a tiny amount of white with her grey. A touch of white, the colour of fog's secret luminance. The subtle scent of lavender from Clara's cooling tea mingled with the smell of damp paper and watercolour paint. This familiar blend of aromas was as much a part of her morning ritual as the painting itself. She reached for her chipped blue mug and took another sip of tea, now at the perfect drinking temperature. "The fog needs more movement," she murmured, setting down the mug and taking up a slightly softer brush. This one had a broader point, perfect for the sweeping gestures she now wished to make. Clara mixed more of her fog colour, adding the smallest touch of violet. "Morning fog with just a hint of dawn," she named it. Then added these gentle sweeps to suggest the way the mist curled and lifted from the creek's surface. The watercolour spread and bloomed where it met the still damp paper, creating soft, diffused edges that perfectly captured the insubstantial nature of fog. Meanwhile, the snail continued its slow journey across the window, its silver trail now forming a gentle arc across the pane. Clara imagined the world from the snail's perspective. The vast expanse of glass, the steady drum of raindrops all around, the safety of its spiral home carried always on its back. There was something deeply comforting in the creature's self-contained journey, its complete acceptance of its own pace. Outside, the creek's murmur became more perceptible as the rain eased ever so slightly, not stopping, but softening its touch upon the world. This subtle change altered the acoustic texture of the morning, allowing the creek's gentle voice to rise beneath the rain's constant patter. Clara tilted her head slightly, appreciating this layered soundscape that surrounded her studio. The quality of light shifted as well, the pearl grey of early morning gradually warming to a soft gold that illuminated the fog from within. The mist now glowed with gentle luminosity, transforming what had been purely white into something cream-coloured and warm. This changing light revealed new dimensions in the fog, swirling patterns and eddies that had been invisible minutes before. "The light is changing the fog story," Clara observed softly, setting aside the brush she had been using. She selected another from her collection, this one with a slightly broader tip, to capture the expanded qualities of the morning mist. "Now we need more warmth." She mixed a small amount of yellow ochre with her fog grey. "This is the colour of morning light finding its way through mist," she whispered, applying delicate touches to her painting. These warmer tones transformed the composition, bringing life and dimension to what had been primarily cool and ethereal. The snail on her window had progressed further in its journey, now nearly a third of the way across the pane. Its silver trail caught the warming light, transforming from a simple glossy path to one containing hints of gold and pearl. Clara noticed how the trail varied in width, sometimes broad, sometimes narrow, creating a visual rhythm across the glass. A new sound joined the morning's gentle symphony, the distinctive plop of water droplets falling from leaves into the creek below. Each drop created expanding circles on the water's surface, ripples that travelled outward until they met the creek's natural current and were carried away. These momentary intersections of movement fascinated Clara. The vertical fall of drops meeting the horizontal flow of the creek, creating patterns that existed for mere seconds before dissolving back into the whole. "Water writing on water," she murmured, adding the subtlest suggestions of these circular ripples to her painting with a nearly dry brush. The effect was barely perceptible, just enough to create visual texture without disrupting the painting's overall serenity. The snail on her window paused in its journey, its antennae extending and contracting as though tasting the air. Its shell, now catching more of the morning light, revealed subtle patterns that Clara hadn't noticed before. Concentric rings of varying browns and ambers that spiraled inward to the shell's apex. The creature's slow, deliberate movements contained a kind of wisdom, Clara thought, an acceptance of its nature and pace that humans so often struggle to achieve. She set down her brush and reached for her tea, which had cooled to room temperature. The lavender flavour had deepened with time, becoming more pronounced as the honey note softened. Clara sipped thoughtfully, her eyes moving between her painting and the scene outside her window, noting the differences and similarities between her interpretation and the world itself. The painting was taking on its own character now, not merely a representation of the fog and creek, but a response to them, a conversation between artist and landscape conducted through colour and form. Clara, had not attempted to capture every detail of the scene before her, but rather its essence, the relationship between water and air, between movement and stillness, between what was clearly seen and what was merely sensed. Setting down her mug, Clara selected a finer brush and mixed a small amount of a warm, earthy brown on her palette. "This is for you, little traveller," she said softly, glancing at the snail. With delicate precision, she added a small suggestion of the creature and its path to the corner of her painting. Not central, but present. A quiet acknowledgement of shared experience. The rain chain outside her window played its gentle music as water continued to flow from cup to cup. The sound had a meditative quality, a simple pattern that repeated without ever becoming exactly the same. Clara found herself breathing in rhythm with this tranquil chorus, her body relaxing more deeply into the morning's creative flow. She looked again at the fog-embraced creek, noticing how the mist seemed to be slowly lifting in certain areas, while gathering more densely in others. This constant, subtle shifting created an impression of the landscape breathing, expanding and contracting in the slowest of rhythms. The creek remained visible as a darker ribbon winding through the mist. Its edges softened, but its presence unmistakable. Clara mixed more water into her paints, creating washes so transparent they were barely more than tinted water. "For the places where fog becomes light," she explained to herself, applying these diluted colours with a gentle touch. The paper accepted these washes eagerly, the fibres swelling slightly with moisture, creating subtle textures as the pigment settled into the tiny valleys of the paper's surface. Clara noticed a change in the creek's voice, a subtle deepening as water from upstream gradually added volume to its flow. This was not a dramatic shift, but a gradual enrichment, like a singer finding a fuller resonance in their voice. The sound remained gentle, a continuous murmur that blended harmoniously with the rain's patter and the occasional notes of the rain chain. "The creek is finding its full voice," Clara observed quietly, mixing a slightly deeper blue on her palette. With careful touches, she added this new tone to the lower portions of her painting, suggesting the increased presence of the water without making it dominate the composition. The balance between fog and creek remained the focus, neither element overpowering the other, both existing in perfect relationship. The snail had resumed its journey across the window, leaving more of its silvery signature on the glass. Clara watched as it navigated around a small droplet of water, adjusting its path with what seemed like consideration. There was something deeply satisfying in witnessing this small life form making its way through the world on its own terms, responding to obstacles with neither frustration nor hurry. Clara dipped her brush in clean water and returned to her palette, where she mixed a colour so subtle it was difficult to name. Somewhere between silver and white with the faintest hint of blue. "The colour of a snail's passage," she whispered, adding the lightest suggestion of the creature's trail to the edge of her painting. The brush barely touched the paper, leaving a mark that caught the light rather than simply reflecting it. The fog above the creek continued its slow, graceful dance, rising here, settling there, constantly changing while remaining essentially the same. Clara observed how it interacted with the few trees that stood along the creek's edge, embracing their lower trunks while their upper branches remained clear, creating an effect of floating above the mist. This intersection of solid and ephemeral, of rooted and formless, created a visual poetry that Clara sought to capture in her painting. She mixed a slightly darker green-grey for these trees, applying it with vertical strokes that contrasted with the horizontal movement of the fog and creek. "Trees are the bridges," she murmured, "connecting water and sky." These additions created a subtle structural element in the composition, anchoring the more ethereal aspects of fog and mist without diminishing their dreamlike quality. She set down her brush and stretched her finger gently, extending each one in turn to release any gathering tension. Her hand moved in a slow, mindful dance of its own, each finger opening like a petal to the morning light. This small ritual helped maintain the connection between her body and her work, ensuring that no part of her became stiff or forgotten in the process of creation. Clara observed how the morning light had begun to filter more directly through certain areas of the fog, creating small pools of brightness on the creek's surface. These illuminated spots glistened like scattered silver coins, creating natural focal points in the landscape. The contrast between these brighter areas and the surrounding mist added depth to the scene without disrupting its overall harmony. "Light finding water," she murmured, reaching for a clean brush. She mixed the smallest amount of titanium white on her palette and added it with delicate touches to her painting, suggesting these bright spots where sunlight penetrated the fog. These additions transformed the composition, adding a new layer of visual interest that drew the eye gently through the scene. The snail had reached the midpoint of the window now, its journey a testament to quiet persistence. Clara noticed how it occasionally paused, antennae extended, as if contemplating its next move, or perhaps simply experiencing the world around it. These moments of stillness within movement fascinated her, the creature's natural rhythm of action and rest, of progress and pause. Beyond the window, the fog along the creek was beginning to reveal more of the landscape as it gradually thinned in patches. Small details emerged, a cluster of early spring ferns unfurling along the bank, their bright green spirals standing out against the creek's darker margins. The rain continued to fall upon them, each droplet magnifying the delicate patterns of the uncurling fronds. Clara mixed a new color on her palette, a fresh, vibrant green tempered with just enough grey to harmonize with the overall mood of the painting. "New fern green," she whispered, "the color of beginnings." With precise touches, she added suggestions of these emerging plants to the creek's edge in her painting, careful to maintain their proper scale and placement. The quality of sound in the studio shifted subtly as the rain's pattern on the roof evolved. What had been a continuous gentle patter now included occasional soft drumming as water gathered in the leaves of the cherry trees and then released in collective drops onto the studio roof. This natural rhythm created a pleasant counterpoint to the more constant background of rainfall. Clara tilted her head slightly, appreciating this layered soundscape. Her brush paused as she listened, absorbing the nuanced changes in the morning's audio texture. These moments of receptive stillness were as much a part of her creative process as the active application of paint, the balance of doing and being, of expression and impression. Returning to her painting with renewed awareness, Clara noticed areas where the paper had begun to dry, creating subtle boundaries between wet and damp regions. Rather than fighting against this natural process, she worked with it, using these emerging edges to suggest the boundaries between different layers of fog, between water and air, between the visible and the partially obscured. The paper knows something about fog too, she observed quietly, appreciating how the medium itself contributed to the expression of her subject. The watercolor paper's absorbent nature, its texture and response to moisture, all participated in the creation of the image, making each painting a collaboration between artist, materials, and subject. The creek's gentle murmur seemed to rise and fall in subtle waves, creating a natural breathing pattern that Clara unconsciously matched with her own respiration. This synchronization between body and environment brought a deepening sense of connection, of being fully present within the moment rather than merely observing it. Clara set down her brush and reached for a clean cloth, gently blotting areas of her painting to lift moisture and pigment, creating subtle highlights where the fog was thinnest. This technique of removal rather than addition brought a new dimension to her work, the suggestion of light emerging through gradual revelation rather than direct depiction. Outside, a light breeze, no more than a whisper of moving air, created momentary clearings in the fog, brief windows through which more of the creek and its surroundings became visible before being veiled again. These transient glimpses revealed how the rain had enhanced every colour in the landscape, deepening the browns of wet wood, intensifying the greens of rain-soaked plants, bringing richness to what might have seemed ordinary on a dry day. Clara mixed a slightly darker blue-green on her palette. Creek Depth Blue, she named it, using it to suggest the deeper sections of water visible in these momentary clearings. These additions anchored the composition, providing points of visual rest amid the more ethereal elements of fog and mist. The snail continued its patient journey across the window, its pace neither quickening nor slowing regardless of the shifting light or occasional stronger patter of rain against the glass. There was something profoundly reassuring in this steady progress, this simple creature following its own internal guidance, untroubled by external changes, complete in its snail nature. Clara observed how the silver trail behind it had begun to catch more varied colours as the morning light evolved. Hints of blue and gold appearing within what had first seemed merely silver. This natural iridescence reminded her of how beauty often revealed itself gradually, offering deeper dimensions to those patient enough to notice. "Your path holds all the colours," she whispered to the snail, returning to her palette to mix a subtle opalescent tone, a translucent white with the merest touch of blue and gold. With her finest brush, she added hints of this colour to the edge of her painting, where she had suggested the snail's presence, honouring the creature's contribution to her morning. The rain-swollen creek had begun to create gentle eddies, where it curved around partially submerged stones, the water swirling in hypnotic circular patterns before rejoining the main flow. These continuous formations and dissolutions of pattern mirrored the fog above, both water and air engaged in constant, unhurried transformation, each responding to subtle influences too delicate for human perception. Clara added suggestions of these circular movements to her painting with gentle curved strokes, creating a visual rhythm that guided the eye through the composition. These additions connected different areas of the painting, creating a sense of flow that mirrored the actual landscape, while maintaining the dreamy quality that fog and rain had brought to the morning. The light continued its gentle evolution as the morning progressed, not brightening dramatically, but shifting in quality, moving from the cool pearl grey of early hours to a warmer, more golden tone that suffused the fog with a honeyed glow. This transformation altered every colour in the landscape, bringing warmth to what had been cool, depth to what had been flat. Clara responded to this change by adding small amounts of yellow ochre to several of her previously mixed colours. "The light is teaching us about time," she murmured, applying these warmer tones in delicate glazes over areas of her painting. These transparent layers allowed the earlier colours to show through while subtly transforming them, creating a sense of depth and temporal progression. She set down her brush and leaned back slightly in her wicker chair, taking a moment to observe her painting as a whole. The composition had evolved beyond her initial intentions, not dramatically, but in the natural way that a conversation evolves as both parties listen and respond to each other. The dialogue between Clara, her materials, and the landscape outside had created something that belonged fully to this specific morning. Beyond the window, the fog had begun to lift from the higher portions of the landscape, though it still clung to the creek itself. This gradual unveiling revealed more of the meadow beyond, where rain-heavy grasses bent in gentle arcs, each blade adorned with droplets that caught the strengthening light. The contrast between the clear upper air and the fog-embraced creek created a horizontal division in the scene, a natural horizon that hadn't been visible earlier. Clara mixed a new shade on her palette, a soft, muted green gold for these emerging grasses. Rain-blessed green, she named it quietly, applying it with gentle horizontal strokes that suggested distance and expansion. These additions provided context for the creek and fog, situating them within the broader landscape while maintaining their central importance in the composition. The snail had progressed further on its window journey, now approaching the far edge of the pane. Its path formed an elegant arc across the glass. Not a direct line, but a gentle curve that seemed to respond to invisible influences, perhaps variations in the glass itself, or subtle changes in temperature, or simply the creature's own mysterious intentions. Clara observed the fullness of this silver signature with appreciation, noting how the complete arc had a visual harmony that individual sections had only hinted at. There was a lesson here about patience and perspective, about how meaning often emerges from wholeness rather than fragments, from completed journeys rather than isolated moments. She added a few final touches to her suggestion of the snail's path in her painting, echoing the graceful curve she had observed on her window. These subtle additions completed a visual motif that connected the painting's edge with its interior, creating a sense of continuity and gentle movement that complemented the flowing fog and creek. The rain's rhythm had remained wonderfully constant through all these gradual changes in light and landscape. Its steady presence provided a foundation for the morning's unfolding, a reliable element that connected early dawn to approaching midday. Clara found deep contentment in this continuity, this natural fidelity that required no effort or intention. She listened more closely to the layered sounds around her. The rain's gentle tapping on roof and window, the creek's flowing murmur, the occasional soft notes of the rain chain, distant bird calls interspersed throughout. Together, these elements created a natural composition as nuanced and harmonious as any human-created symphony, but without deliberate design, each sound simply being true to its nature. Clara closed her eyes for a moment, allowing these sounds to wash over her, to exist not as separate elements, but as a unified whole. Her breathing slowed, deepening into the same rhythm as the rain and creek. This brief meditation renewed her connection to the morning, to her work, to the quiet joy of presence. When she opened her eyes, she noticed how the quality of light had settled into a stable radiance. Neither the cool uncertainty of dawn, nor the revealing brightness of midday, but a perfect intermediate state that illuminated without harshness. This light revealed details while preserving mystery, defining forms while maintaining softness. "This is the light of perfect balance," she whispered, looking at her painting with fresh eyes. The composition had reached a similar point of equilibrium, neither too defined nor too vague, neither too sparse nor too detailed. Like the landscape itself, the painting existed in a state of harmonious tension between revelation and suggestion. With a sense of natural completion, Clara set her brush across the rim of her water jar. The painting before her had reached that rare state of balance where any additional touch would diminish rather than enhance. Like the morning itself, it had unfolded according to its own nature, revealing itself gradually through the dialogue between artist, subject, and materials. She rose from her wicker chair with unhurried grace, the crocheted cushion holding her impression for a moment, before slowly returning to its original form. Moving to the window, Clara stood close enough to observe the snail as it approached the edge of the glass. Its journey was nearly complete, at least the portion visible from her perspective. The silver trail it had left behind now spanned almost the entire width of the pane, a glistening signature that caught and transformed the morning light. "Thank you for sharing your journey," she whispered to the small creature. There was genuine gratitude in her voice, appreciation for this quiet reminder of how beauty emerges through patience, through steady progression, through being entirely present within one's nature. Beyond the window, the fog continued to lift gradually from the upper portions of the landscape, while maintaining its embrace of the creek. This partial revealing created a perfect visual metaphor for the balance between knowing and mystery, between what is seen and what is sensed. The rain continued its gentle descent, connecting sky to earth in countless liquid threads, each droplet completing its own journey from cloud to ground. Clara gathered her empty teapot and chipped blue mug, cradling them with careful hands. The morning's ritual of painting had completed its natural arc, moving from preparation through exploration to resolution. What remained now was appreciation, the quiet enjoyment of work completed, of attention fully given, of connection deeply felt. She took one last look at her painting on the easel. Creek fog rendered in soft greys and blues, the suggestion of emerging ferns along the bank, the distant meadow becoming visible as mist retreated, and in one corner the delicate silver arc of a snail's path across glass. The composition held the essence of this specific morning. Not merely its visual appearance, but its feel, its tempo, its particular quality of presence. The painting would dry on its own as the day progressed, the paper gradually releasing moisture back into the air, the colors settling into their permanent relationships. This transformation would happen whether witnessed or not, a natural process requiring no intervention. There was wisdom in this letting be, this trust in completion finding its own time. Clara moved toward the studio door with the same unhurried pace that had characterized her entire morning. She did not turn on lights or disturb the peaceful atmosphere that had developed during her hours of quiet work. The rain would continue long after she departed, its gentle rhythm unaffected by her presence or absence. At the threshold she paused for a final moment, taking in the scene before her. The easel holding her finished work, the morning light filtering through the window with its snail-sign glass, the view of fog-embraced creek beyond. All existed in perfect harmony, each element contributing to a whole that exceeded the sum of its parts. Clara slipped quietly from the studio, closing the door with gentle care behind her. Inside, the rain's soft melody continued its endless composition, droplets on roof and window, water flowing through the copper cups of the rain chain, the creek's steady murmur beneath it all. These sounds would continue through the hours ahead, unchanged by human attention, reliable in their soothing presence. The painting remained on his easel by the window, capturing a moment of perfect balance between revelation and mystery. Outside, the actual fog would continue its gradual retreat from the landscape. The creek would continue its patient journey toward distant waters, and the rain would persist in its gentle descent, connecting all things in its quiet, unending embrace. And the rain played on, its lullaby softening the edges of the world.